It all began on the afternoon we gathered to clean out Grandma's house. The air was heavy with the smell of her favorite lavender sachets, tucked into every drawer, and the silence felt too sharp without her gentle hum in the background. We thought we knew what to expect: old photographs, worn recipe books, and the endless little trinkets she collected over the years. But tucked away at the back of her dresser drawer, beneath neatly folded scarves, we found something that none of us were prepared for. It was a sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, its edges curled, but the bold hospital logo stamped at the top was still visible. For a long moment, no one moved. It was as if the envelope itself held a weight heavier than the air in the room. When we finally opened it, what we found inside wasn't just words on a page, it was a secret that Grandma had carried silently for decades. A secret that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about her life. We were left stunned. Why would she hide something like this? Why would she carry it alone, never breathing a word to her children, to us, or to anyone else? In that instant, the grandmother we loved, the one who had always been open and full of wisdom, suddenly felt like a stranger holding a second life we never knew about. And that's when the questions began to spiral. What was Grandma hiding? Why did she keep it from us? And perhaps most haunting of all, was someone else in the family part of the secret all along? But as we unfolded the letter, it became clear, Grandma had lived a life far more complicated than we ever imagined. And to understand why, we have to go back to who she really was. To truly understand the shock of what we found, you have to know who Grandma was to us. She wasn't just the head of the family, she was its heartbeat. Warm, strong, and endlessly selfless, she held our lives together in ways we didn't always appreciate until she was gone. Sunday dinners at her house were a tradition, where her laughter filled the kitchen louder than the clatter of pots and pans, and her hugs seemed to erase whatever burdens we carried in from the outside world. On the surface, her life looked simple, almost ordinary. She rose early every morning, tended her garden, and baked pies that no one in the family has ever been able to replicate. She rarely complained, no matter how hard the day had been. If you asked, she'd smile and say, "I'm fine, don't fuss." To us, that was just Grandma, steady, unshakable, always putting others before herself. Her children, my mother and my uncle, leaned on her wisdom constantly, and we grandchildren saw her as unbreakable, like the roots of an old oak tree. We trusted that she'd always be there. And if there was one thing everyone knew about Grandma, it was her dislike of hospitals. She'd wave off doctor visits with a scoff, muttering, "Doctors just make you sicker." We laughed at it sometimes, chalking it up to her old-fashioned ways. She'd take herbal teas over prescriptions, home remedies over appointments, and we assumed it was nothing more than stubborn pride. Looking back now, that stubbornness wasn't just habit, it was a shield. A shield hiding something she never wanted us to see. At the time, we thought her stubbornness about hospitals was harmless. But the letter in that drawer proved it was much more than stubbornness, it was survival. And the words on that page left us reeling. Before I share what was written in that hospital letter, if you're drawn into this story, hit the like button. It helps this story reach more people who love true family mysteries. When we finally slid open the envelope, the room grew so still that you could hear the paper tear. Inside was a single sheet, folded neatly into thirds, its creases sharp even after all those years. At the top was the hospital's letterhead, the ink faded but still unmistakable. As my uncle began to read aloud, our hearts sank with every line. The letter was dated more than 30 years ago. It explained, in careful medical language, that Grandma had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The doctors warned that without immediate treatment, possibly surgery, her health would be at grave risk. They urged her to come back right away for further tests and a treatment plan. But we knew, standing there in her bedroom decades later, that she had never gone back. She had ignored the advice, kept the diagnosis to herself, and carried on with her life as if nothing had ever happened. The words blurred as my mother's hands trembled, holding the page closer to her chest. She knew, all this time, she knew. The weight of it pressed on all of us. Why would she ignore something so serious? Why wouldn't she tell her children, who would have done anything to help? Why didn't she at least confide in one of us? We traded glances, searching for an answer that wasn't there. Grandma had outlived the very warning this letter carried. She had laughed, danced at family weddings, cooked endless meals, and rocked babies to sleep, all with a heart that carried a silent, ticking thread inside it. It made no sense. She was always so careful with us, always the first to worry if someone caught a cold or skipped a meal. And yet when it came to herself, she chose silence over survival. A knot of confusion and hurt grew in the room. Was it fear? Was it pride? Or something else entirely? All we knew in that moment was that the woman we thought we understood had kept a secret so large it threatened to change the way we remembered her. And for the first time, the image of Grandma as unshakable and invincible began to crack. We were shocked to learn she never went back for treatment. But the bigger question still haunted us: did anyone else know? The room was thick with silence after the letter was read, but emotions quickly boiled over. My mother was the first to speak, her voice breaking. How could she keep this from us? We could have helped her, we should have known. She clutched the letter like it might dissolve if she let go, her eyes wet with both anger and grief. My uncle, on the other hand, shook his head in disbelief. She lived with this for decades. All those years, she just carried it alone? His words weren't angry, but heavy with sorrow. For us grandchildren, the discovery landed differently. To us, Grandma had always been untouchable, a constant in every season of our lives. Finding out she had been vulnerable, hiding something so serious, shattered that image. It felt like we had been let in on a part of her life too late, like she had written a story with missing pages, and only now, after her passing, were we glimpsing what had been erased. As the shock rippled through the family, tension grew. My mother accused my uncle of being too calm. You're acting like this doesn't matter. She lied to us. He shot back that maybe Grandma had her reasons we might never fully understand. Between the tears and the raised voices, a deeper ache set in, a feeling of betrayal. For so long, we thought Grandma trusted us with everything. Now, the idea that she had lived with a dangerous secret shook the foundation of that trust. What else had she kept hidden? And worse, was it possible that someone else in the family had known all along? As we argued over the letter, it felt like the truth was pulling us apart. And then, in the bottom of an old cedar box, we found something that changed everything. What would you have done if you were in our shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious if you'd call it bravery or betrayal. The next day, while sorting through more of Grandma's belongings, my mother opened an old cedar box tucked away in the closet. Inside were faded photographs, birthday cards, and at the very bottom, a small bundle of letters tied with string. Most were harmless, notes from friends, holiday greetings, but one stood out. It wasn't from the hospital. It was from Grandma's younger sister, written decades ago. The letter began gently, almost pleading. I know you don't want to go back, but please reconsider. The children deserve to know. At least let someone help you carry this. The room fell into stunned silence as the realization hit. Grandma's sister had known. She had carried this burden with her, silently, for all these years. My mother's face darkened with a mix of anger and betrayal. She knew? Aunt Rose knew? And she never said a word to us? Her voice cracked, echoing through the room. For my uncle, the discovery cut differently. He clenched his jaw and muttered, she was respecting Grandma's wishes. Maybe she thought she was protecting us. But for the rest of us, it only deepened the wound. Someone in the family could have spoken up. Someone could have broken the silence before it was too late. The idea that the secret had been shared, but not with her own children, stung in a way we couldn't put into words. In that moment, Grandma's silence became more complicated. It wasn't just her choice, it was a choice upheld by someone else we loved and trusted. And that raised a painful question: was this a selfless act of protection, or a selfish act of secrecy? Grandma's sister had known. For decades, she had kept the secret too. But the real question was, why would Grandma ask her to stay silent? The more we pieced together from her notes and the letters exchanged with Aunt Rose, the clearer Grandma's reasoning became. It wasn't carelessness, and it wasn't denial, it was choice. A deliberate one. She had written, in her neat, looping handwriting, "I watched what the hospital did to Harold. Machines, needles, endless tests, he wasn't living, he was waiting to die. I won't put the children through that." Harold, our grandfather, had passed years earlier after a drawn-out illness that left deep scars on the family. For Grandma, the memory of watching him fade under fluorescent hospital lights was unbearable. She was determined that her children would never have to watch her suffer in the same way. Money was another factor. Treatment back then was expensive, uncertain, and overwhelming. Grandma had always been proud of standing on her own 2 feet, of never being a burden. The thought of draining her children's savings or altering the course of their lives for her care was something she could not accept. And then there was her stubborn belief in fate. "What will be, she wrote. To her, life wasn't meant to be stretched out by wires and medicine, it was meant to be lived fully, every single day, until it ended naturally. Her silence wasn't born of indifference, it was an act of protection, at least in her eyes. But knowing her reasoning didn't erase the ache. It only complicated it. Was it love that made her hide the truth? Or fear? Or pride? For the family, her decision left us wrestling with something far bigger than her condition. It forced us to ask, whose choice is it to decide how much of themselves to share, even with the ones they love most? Her reasons were powerful, rooted in love, fear, and loss. But even knowing them didn't ease the pain. In fact, it left us facing an even harder truth: how would this secret change our family forever? If you've ever had a family member keep a life-changing secret, share your story below. You never know who might need to hear it. In the weeks after discovering the truth, the weight of Grandma's secret lingered in every conversation. At first, it divided us. My mother couldn't shake the anger, she replayed the what-ifs over and over. What if we could have saved her? What if she could have lived longer, seen more of her grandchildren grow? The guilt gnawed at her, as though she had failed, even though she had never been given the chance. My uncle, meanwhile, defended Grandma's choice. To him, her silence was an act of strength. She wanted to protect us. That's who she was. Always shielding us, even from her own pain. His words brought some comfort, but also widened the rift with my mother, who saw it as blind loyalty. For us grandchildren, the impact was different. We were caught between admiration for her bravery and the sting of betrayal. The woman who had always told us to be honest, to never hide from family, had done exactly that. It left us questioning not only her choices, but our own. How much should we share with those we love? And how much do we keep to ourselves? Yet, as painful as it was, the secret forced us to see Grandma in a new light, not as a flawless figure, but as a human being with fears, convictions, and imperfections. In a strange way, her decision connected us to her more deeply. Still, the silence left scars. Trust felt shaken, and family gatherings carried a new kind of heaviness. Every laugh, every story, seemed haunted by the reminder that love sometimes comes wrapped in mystery, and not all mysteries feel like gifts. The discovery threatened to divide us. Yet, in the middle of our grief, a new understanding began to take root, one that would carry us to the very end of this story. In the end, Grandma's secret became a mirror, reflecting not just her choices, but the way we saw ourselves as a family. For weeks, we debated whether her silence was an act of love or an act of fear. Some argued she was selfish, denying us the chance to stand by her. Others believed she was selfless, carrying the burden alone so that we could live free of worry. But as the raw emotions softened, something shifted. We began to see that her decision, however painful, was rooted in the same love she had always shown us. The Sunday dinners, the laughter in her kitchen, the way she made each of us feel like we were her favorite, that was the life she wanted us to remember. Not hospital beds. Not fear. Not the slow unraveling of her health. The letter didn't erase her legacy, it complicated it. And maybe that was the point. She was not just a grandmother, but a woman shaped by grief, pride, and an unshakable will. She chose to live on her own terms, even if it meant leaving us with questions we may never fully answer. At her memorial, my mother finally said something that settled deep into all of us. She may not have trusted us with her secret, but she trusted us with her love. And that's what we'll carry forward. So we decided, as a family, that we would live differently. We promised to be more open, to share the hard truths instead of burying them. To face struggles together, not alone. In that way, Grandma's silence became the seed of a new kind of honesty. And even now, whenever I think of that envelope, I realize it didn't just contain a diagnosis. It carried a lesson, that love is complicated, sometimes painful, but always powerful. Grandma took her secret to the grave, but in discovering it, we found a truth that changed us forever. If this story touched you, share it with someone you love, and let us know in the comments, do you believe she was protecting her family, or betraying them? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real stories that uncover the hidden chapters of family life.